All right, Matthew Fairburn, I think we're live. Tuesday, November 7th, 2023, Baker Fairburn Hockey Show back at it again. Going to recap what's been going on with the Sabres coming off a loss tonight, a 3-2 overtime loss in Carolina. The ping-ponging of wins and losses so far with the Sabres, just kind of having a hard time getting traction this team, but there is some good things happening that we're going to get into tonight. Matthew Fairburn. But let me properly tee it up. I'm kind of like Beck and the Flaming Lips. I don't know if you listen to them. They don't know how to end a song. I don't know how to end a podcast. I think that's pretty clear. But I don't know how to start one either. I'm going to get better at it, I promise. But so the Sabres, last time you and I talked, they won a game that they had no business winning last week. The first game on, I think it was Wednesday against Philly. Came out on Friday, lost 5-1 at home to Philly. They go into the center of the hockey universe on Saturday evening and pick up a big 6-4 win in Toronto. Devin Levi getting back in action for that one. I'm pretty sure we'll probably talk about goaltenders. It seems to be a theme. And then tonight, we are fresh off the Sabres falling to 6-1 on the year, 6th place in the Atlantic Division now after a 3-2 overtime loss in Carolina. But like I alluded to, Matthew, see, I'm getting my rhythm now. Feel good. Had coffee. We're kind of grooving now. We got over the hard part. There has been some good things going on, despite some of the recent results. And I think a prudent place to start is with one Alex Tuch. Alex Tuch ended the month of October pretty well with points in 3 straight. He now has 5 points, I believe, in 4 games of November. So I have him at 9 points in his last 7 games. And I think he had a pretty good game tonight, despite that overtime shift that didn't work out in the Sabres' favor. But what do you have any takeaways on Alex Tuch to kick us off tonight? Just because you and I talked about him early in the season, and maybe he was dinged. He was kind of the talk of the town for all the wrong reasons. And now I think he's kind of, if they can start winning some games, he might be the toast of the town in Saberland.
He's back, right? It feels like he's back. And early in the season, it was a weird go for him. And the 2 fights stood out because you could tell, A, he was frustrated, and B, he wanted to find some way to impact the game. I mean, the second fight against Brady Tkachuk, he didn't really choose that fight, but he swatted at the hornet's nest there a little bit and knew what he was getting into. So he was just really struggling to find ways to make an impact on the game. He and I spoke before the Devils game, and that was the thing that frustrated him more than anything. If I was getting shots, if I was getting chances, the points wouldn't bother me. But the fact that he felt like he wasn't doing any of that was getting under his skin quite a bit, and he was taking it pretty personally, mostly because of, what he means to his teammates. I went through actually during this game because I was curious. 20-8 last year, the Sabres were in games in which Alex Tuch scored, which seems significant. I mean, he's one of their best players. He scores a lot. So you're going to have games that he scores where you don't win. But I thought of it tonight because when he scored, I thought, man, it feels like most of the time he scores, the rest of the team is going too. As he goes, the Sabres go in a lot of ways. Against the Hurricanes Tuesday, as we're recording this, 75% expected goal share for Alex Tuch led the team at 5-on-5 against a damn good Hurricanes team. That goal he scored was, everything that's great about Alex Tuch. He can be a pain in the ass on the forecheck. He's got a great reach, and he is relentless around the net. Those things were all missing early in the season, and they're back. And this game felt better than Saturday night to me for Alex Tuch, even though he had the 2 third period goals. The first goal was sort of, just a little bit lucky by Alex Tuch. He gets to the net, it hits off him. It wasn't so much anything he did there. The empty netter was great. That was the play where I thought, okay, that's what Alex Tuch has been missing. And he carried that right over into this game in Carolina. So yes, we're talking fresh off a 3-2 overtime loss for the Sabres. But in this bucket of 3 games since we last spoke, they had what I think was their worst game of the season against the Flyers. It was disgusting on Friday night. Terrible, terrible game all around, and they got the result they deserved. They played much better against the Leafs on Saturday night. Really impressive to go in there on the second half of a back-to-back, 3 games in 4 nights, banged up, switching guys in and out of the lineup, and they get a tough 6-4 win where the lead was not safe all game. It kept going back and forth. And then this game, which feels like more in that Leafs, way closer to that Leafs game than it was that Flyers game. The Flyers game looks like the anomaly, and you're going to have those in an 82 game season. Doesn't excuse everything that went wrong there, but this 3-2 game against the Hurricanes was pretty strong for a lot of reasons. And Tuch, I thought, led the way. Dahlin's goal was great. Just a vintage play by Dahlin to
I
pass
taught
it
him
to
that.
himself.
That's my
Yeah.
move. That's my move. I taught him
That's
that.
That's a move that you can pull off at the lower levels a lot of times, but at the NHL level, if a guy's pulling that off, he's pretty good. So
Sharp
see,
angle shot too, by the way. Like that,
quick
that's a goal that
release.
probably shouldn't go in, but he caught him by surprise with the quick release. I'm glad you said that because that's exactly the key to that goal.
That's how you score sometimes in the NHL, right? It's not always where you're shooting from. It's how quickly you decide to shoot, where you decide to put the puck, and when your body's positioned a certain way that you're not in it necessarily a shooting position, but you get it off anyways. So a lot to be encouraged from these last 2 games, I think. They're starting to look like the team that got it rolling last year, and I think that's why, after a game like this loss, you're not feeling you get a point going into Carolina against one of the toughest teams in the East. That's not too bad. You try to roll that in and start to stack some of these games together because it has been, to your point, a bit of a yo-yo for them, back and forth between wins and losses. And so they do need to start stacking some points, but they're at least treading water in the Eastern Conference. And when you look around the league at what some other teams are doing, namely Edmonton, it's better to be treading water than sinking with cinder blocks
Ooh,
tied around your
giant
leg.
fart noise coming out of Alberta. It's bad news up there, but yeah, I guess things could be a lot worse. To your point, now with Tuch, I think kind of it's good to see him going. I think that line, they're back, right? Skinner, Thompson, Tuch, playing very well. But I think a proper segue coming out of Tuch is to talk a little bit about JJ Peterka. Now, Peterka makes that play on the Tuch goal, getting it on the forecheck, simple hockey, little glove pass to himself, right? Kicked it to his stick with the glove and set it out in front. And then Tuch did what he did, relentless, gets that second attempt off the first shot. It was a nice play. But we've talked about Peterka a lot since you and I started getting together here on camera and talking to the people. And he's definitely just a different player this year, confident. I thought tonight, even though like throughout the game, maybe that line, I thought his line, Peterka, Mittelstadt, Greenway, they got going as the game went on, but that's also when Carolina started carrying the play more. I thought tonight's game was pretty even throughout the first 35 minutes. And if you looked at the numbers, whether you're looking at, natural strat trick or whatever, money puck, whatever, Tuch was up there, but Peterka and Mittelstadt, they weren't really getting the shot share, when they were on the ice. But then there were plays though that Peterka made tonight. I thought that were really good, right place, right time, breaking up plays with a stick, good defensive plays. But he constantly makes an impression every game. I've noticed. I think he's been really consistent. He's playing big, playing fast, and I still think he's just scratching the surface. Now you have 2 lines going. And we should talk a little bit about Peterka because we still have to talk about the bottom of the lineup. I think, while you have some good things going with 6 forwards, you still have a lot of questions with some other 6 forwards. And I think we have a lot to talk about tonight with these forwards. But Peterka, you feeling what I'm feeling?
Absolutely. The one thing early in the season with Peterka that I could poke holes in was I wanted him shooting more. There was times where he was always in these great positions. It seems like to your point, a few times, like he's standing out for the right reasons in just about every game. And there were a few times in each game where he'd have a great chance and he'd try to make an extra pass or he'd hold it an extra second. And it feels like especially these last two games, he's a lot more decisive and it's starting to come out. And Don Granato pointed out when I asked him after the Leafs game about Peterka, because he singled Peterka out, and he mentioned the way he dumped the puck in on that Greenway goal against the Leafs, dumping it into space, not dumping it in mindlessly, dumping it in to make a play, drive coverage, get the puck to the front of the net. Greenway scores a goal. Similar, tonight he gets hauled down there. He's, on the ice and he finds a way. That's a play where easily a young, tentative player could get tossed to the ice, be a little rattled, and not have the presence of mind to find the puck and put it somewhere. And Peterka gets it, puts it right to the front of the net, and gives Alex Tuch a chance. The play doesn't even start if he gives up and just lets the guy break out. Those are little things that you probably don't even notice that if he doesn't get a stick on the puck. You don't blame him. You're just, as a fan, you're probably sitting at home complaining about no call, right? You're sitting there thinking, why isn't there a penalty? And you're not even thinking about the fact that he didn't do that. And instead of in that split second, he could have looked at the ref. He could have done a million things that would have not resulted in the play that they got. And just like Alex Tuch finishing the play, like that goal, when you're down 1-0 against Carolina in that building, you go down 2-0 to them, you can almost turn the lights out against
Toast.
that team. I mean,
Yep.
I know they're having some goaltending issues this year. They've got injuries. You can score on them, but traditionally over the last few years, you go down 2-0 against that team, good luck. And so that goal was big time. And I think, to your point, the biggest key with JJ Peterka, or the biggest benefit of his emergence, is they have two solid lines right now. And when they were shuffling things up for a while and splitting guys up and mixing and matching, some nights it didn't feel like they had two solid lines. It felt like they were playing whack-a-mole. They'd have, one good line would pop up one game and another one would pop up the next. Now it feels like you can start to get into a rhythm with these two lines. And you have Casey Mittelstadt, continuing to build and get better and better and become this legit top six center. And coming into the season, the big thing was, well, who do you play him with, right? Who do you play him with to maximize his playmaking ability, his offensive potential? Now, all of a sudden, you have Peterka. You couldn't have done this 12 months ago. Put Casey Mittelstadt with JJ Peterka. It wouldn't have worked because Casey Mittelstadt wasn't where he is, but JJ Peterka wasn't even close to where he is. So that, to me, it starts to make the rest of the puzzle make more sense. But to your point, the bottom six, we've been talking about the forward depth a little bit, and it's a question mark still, especially after, these last couple of games.
Well, they definitely missed Dylan Cousins' presence tonight in the game, I think, even though like I said, it was a pretty even game through almost for the first two full periods. And, as the game went on, though, they needed a third line to keep clicking and keep throwing guys over the boards. Carolina had last change. They got the matchups that they wanted. When you talk about Peterka and it's working with Mittelstadt, I still see, Skinner, Thompson, Tucker back. I think Greenway is going to be handcuffed to Mittelstadt. When Cousins is back, I think all of a sudden you have this luxury of putting Peterka, Cousins, and Quinn when he's healthy, kind of like how they were rolling last year. Then you have three lines. Then you got to find someone to maybe play with Mittelstadt, Greenway. That's how I can kind of sketch it out in my mind right now. A lot of things have to happen, though. Jack Quinn's got to come back to full health, be ready to go. All these guys, they could be a very dangerous team if that really happens. And then you just have to fill in that wing spot with Mittelstadt and Greenway. Do you see it that way, or do you not want to just default back to Cousins between Peterka and Quinn? And I'm looking way too far ahead. I get it, but that's kind of what I tend to do on this podcast with you.
Well, that's the tricky part is, you mentioned that, and yes, Cousins, Peterka, Quinn, I'm good with that line, but in my head, I'm thinking, boy, that's what, 6 weeks away, 8 weeks
Well, it
away
plays into where we're going. Yeah.
before Quinn gets back, and so you have questions to answer in the meantime, right? Because as Brian Cummings notes here, as good as the Mittelstadt situation is on the second line with Peterka and Greenway, now you have to find somebody to play with Cousins when he comes back. And I think they're in a spot where I actually like Joe Stockposo and Gergensons. I like that as your reliable two-way energy type of line. Call them your third or fourth line, whatever you want to call them. That line has been better this season with Jost on it than it has with Krebs on it by the numbers, by the eye test. I think Jost has earned more ice, and he's getting it. That third line tonight was sort of a black hole. They were playing okay early in the game, and then their ice time was completely throttled by the end of the game. Olofsson, Krebs, and Lukas Rusek were not, on the ice in critical situations. Krebs got, some power play time, and that was good. But other than that,
Great opportunity.
He had a great opportunity.
Pass, what a pass from Okposo.
He got robbed, and it's just been a tough go for Krebs early in the year. He's not getting shots on net.
One.
He's not putting points up. So that's where, yes, when Quinn comes back, and it's sort of been the nature of the Sabres, right? And you know it better than anybody studying these prospects, is you start sketching out the 2025 lineup and you start going crazy with the possibilities, right? And we're now getting closer and closer to that, where you go 2 months in the future and you can see a strong top nine. The question is, in the interim, what do you do? And I think it leads into a lot of different discussions, but you're right. You would need to find, if you're going to put Cousins, Peterka, and Quinn back together, you need to find a winger for Casey Mittelstadt and Jordan Greenway. And you have a ton of youngsters who look like they're, maybe ready to go here. Matt Savoie is going to get a shot in the NHL, and that's a big deal. Jiri Kulich is knocking on the door, and he could play a role at some point this season. And then there's, as we've mentioned, the possibility of adding from outside if you feel like you need to do that at some point. Zach Benson is still in the mix here too. I don't want to forget about Zach Benson when he gets healthy and, they get him back in the right place where they feel like physically and mentally he can jump back in. Maybe he gets a little conditioning stint in Rochester, because he played pretty well with Mittelstadt and Greenway at times. I mean, he had to play with just about everybody during training camp and early in the season. So there are options. The problem is they haven't solidified. And that's why having Peterka up there right now is great, because at least you have two full lines. And I thought of it Saturday night when they went 11-7. I thought that's actually not, in the right moments, not a bad thing, because you're tightening the bench anyways, right? You're trying to squeeze ice time from some of those guys anyways, and they needed the extra defenseman to take the load off Ryan Johnson. So yeah, the forward picture is still murky down there in the bottom six.
So let's talk about Savoie, I guess, because I think that was I was trying to set it up in a way where I'm already looking forward to your point. We are in the business of sketching out lineups 2 years in advance. So if it's 6-7 weeks out, that's nothing to me.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's short term.
And it's very short term. It's tomorrow, dude. But I think, so if I look at that whole, let's get Cousins back first and foremost, right? Because then I think things change. The whole dynamics of these lines change when you get him back. And then in my head, okay, the Quinn thing's there. But Savoie, he's up. I talked about him this week on my podcast. I thought he was exceptional. Well, I shouldn't say exceptional. I don't want to oversell. He was very good. Limited his mistakes down in Rochester in the 6 games, 5 points, but it was more just about the maturity in his game. I commented on this again and just cited some examples, the back checking, the details. You could tell he's a team guy. Seth Appert clearly loved having him there for the 2 weeks that he was there. And I think Donnie Granato is going to love having him up here in Buffalo in this little window here. Let's call it a month that he's going to have to use him. And there's probably about let's say 14 games after tonight, there's a window here where they can kind of pick and choose when they're going to put Savoie in the lineup. You've seen him in practice this week since he came back up from Rochester. Tell us what you're seeing. Like, who is he skating with? I think I saw some different combos, but do you think that's a sign of maybe how he's going to be used when he does get in the lineup? And when do we think he's going to get in?
He was skating on Monday on that Krebs, Rusek, Olofsson line. It looked like he was mostly rotating in with Olofsson, but then he rotated in at one point at center. And so there's that option as well. I agree with you from the bits and pieces I saw in Rochester, looked solid, and not just the points, but, just the jump from where he was in the spring in the complete game, I think is a big deal. And if you can get that guy, that's why I think they need to keep an open mind when they bring him in. A lot of people are looking at it as he's got his 9 games or he's got this. If he can help you, he's 19 years old. He's had his extra year in junior. Like, it would not be unheard. It's not like the Zach Benson situation where there's not a ton of 18-year-olds in the league. 19 years old, you got a shot to crack through at that point, and
Mm-hmm.
as a top 10 pick in particular, and somebody as highly skilled as he is, somebody that clearly had as productive a summer as Matt Savoie had, and a team that right now is in need. And so Kevin Adams talks a lot about not wanting to block prospects when they're ready. And I know there's some parts of what has happened in Buffalo early in the season that weren't part of the plan. Dylan Cousins getting hurt here for a few games, not part of the plan. But Jack Quinn getting hurt was part of their planning because it happened before free agency and even before the draft. And so you're sitting there and you could have made moves. And maybe they were looking at the readiness of some of these guys and banking on at least one of them being ready. And I think some of it maybe had to do with Savoie. So I think there's a pretty good chance he gets in this weekend. I feel like Friday makes sense to me. Home game against the Wild, a little bit of a much different opponent than Carolina. Don Granato said he didn't want him playing against the Hurricanes with only one practice. I think that makes a lot of sense given the way the Hurricanes play. But I think all you have to do, Kris, is look at the ice time of some of these forwards, and clearly they want to get somebody else in, right? They're looking for every reason to keep Victor Olofsson out of the lineup. Just by my eye, just by their behavior and what they're doing is he's been scratched for Brandon Biro. He's been scratched for Rusek. He's been scratched for Benson. He's been scratched for Jost. They're picking plenty of guys, giving plenty of guys opportunities over Victor Olofsson. They've also now given Victor Olofsson 8 games out of their 13. Enough of a sample size for them to determine whether he has made the appropriate adjustments to his game that they wanted him to make. They've struck a balance here between giving him enough time to show if he's made improvement and also showing the rest of us how they feel by taking him out of the lineup and by cutting back on his ice time. So that's why I'd say I expect Savoie sooner rather than later. And, from what Seth Appert said, this is a guy that he was talking more about his all around game than his scoring, right? That the guy cares about playing winning hockey and understands how to do that.
He competes, man.
That's a big part of his game, right? That the play speed, the competitiveness. You worry a little bit about it because he's still not very big, and so that competitiveness at the NHL level is a little bit different. But the stick skills, he's got so many traits that there's reasons people are really excited about this guy who's a top 10 pick, but it's a lot of what he could do. He was such a good penalty killer last year in Winnipeg. I don't think he'll be killing penalties for the Sabres because that unit's working really good, but you saw a lot of those traits, the competitiveness coming out as a penalty killer in junior last year. So I'm curious to see him in the lineup. He solves problems if he can go in there. and maybe get something out of Krebs too. The old junior mate.
Peyton Krebs, 8 minutes, 19 seconds of work tonight. Lucas Rusek, this is total ice time, 6 minutes and 40 seconds. Victor Olofsson, 9 minutes and 10 seconds. For your third line, that makes Okposo, Jost, and Gergensons play more. Maybe not the healthiest setup that you want.
They were even listed as the third line tonight, but when the Sabres tweeted out their line chart, it was the Jost line that was the third line. So, and again, that Brian Cummings points out here in the chat, ice time is the coin of the realm. They can say what they want at the podium, but they show you how they feel when they have to put guys on the ice. And so I think we can stop calling the Tyson Jost or the Okposo Gergensons line the third line or the fourth line, because they're treated like the third line in terms of ice time most nights. And until other forwards emerge for that third line, that's how it's going to be, I think. And so it's tough. It's a tough situation because they did nothing at forward, right, in the offseason. And so this is a problem that potentially could have been addressed, but now it's on some of these prospects, I think, to take advantage, or on Savoie, really, to take advantage of an opportunity. And it's a lot to put on his plate at 19.
I don't know if you know the answer to this. How close is Cousins right now?
It sounded like he was day to day. And so I'm thinking by Friday, he's got a pretty good chance. He wasn't on the ice Monday and did not play Tuesday, obviously. So whatever happened in that fight or in the aftermath, he decided to pick a fight with Garnett Hathaway in the closing
not a
minutes.
Wise decision. I know Cousins is scrappy, man, but Hathaway is pretty tough, man.
Yeah, maybe give yourself 5 or 6 more years to get the man strength before you go after Garnett Hathaway. I mean, it's a 5-1 game. The night's going bad enough. You got another game the next day. That's a spot where, I
like the emotion, but yeah, then he picked up a barrier
and he like the portable steps or whatever, and he slammed them against the wall. So I don't really know what happened there. It's upper body, but Don Granato said on Saturday that when he talked to him, he sounded pretty close to normal, and they were trying to give him a few extra days. So maybe by the weekend he's back in, and that does solve a lot of problems.
I wonder. So to kind of bring it back to the forward discussion that we've had thus far, right? You have your Thompson line, they're cooking. Peterka, Greenway, and Mittelstadt, maybe you don't disrupt it. Cousins comes back, maybe you can kick Krebs out to the wing, Savoie on another wing, Cousins down the middle. You have a Western Hockey League line, and maybe you roll that way. And maybe you try that. That could be something maybe worth considering. That's why I was kind of asking if Cousins' re-entry can kind of coincide with Savoie. And again, just spitballing here. But if you're trying to solve to get your bottom 6, get more going out of those, whatever, we'll call them the bottom 6, right? That might work.
It could. I think it's somewhat unfortunate for Cousins that he ends up in the situation. This is how it's been for him, the last, few years, where it's like, all right, here's a couple of young guns you got to carry him, right? And he is the type of player and the type of person who can carry a line, but it puts a ton of spotlight and a ton of pressure on you in the defensive zone, and people are picking apart. He's the type of player now, $7 million. People are picking apart his point totals, picking apart all his underlying numbers. And you think about the context around him from a line mate perspective. Hasn't been great this year, but you know what? Casey Mittelstadt's earning that ice, and the line is working as it's constructed. And you're right. If you could get something clicking, I think kicking Krebs to wing makes sense because Jost is playing so well with Gergensons and Okposo. So
it allows you to keep that line. Yeah.
And so that's 3 lines really that are working fine. It's the fourth line or the third line, whatever you want to call it, that has a ton of question marks. More question marks, I think, than anybody probably. I mean, it was somewhat predictable, though, that they were going to have some trouble making combos without Jack Quinn. Everything looks great when Jack Quinn comes back. You're still short maybe a winger, but everything looks a lot better when you have, him, if he gets back to being himself right away. That's not going to
Everything
happen.
does look great. Maybe that's why I went there so early,
Yeah.
It's like,
I mean,
let's just get there, man. It's like, it'll be Christmas time. Everybody's be feeling good. Peppermint ranchata and the hot chocolate.
and Jack Quinn
Quinn's
back in the
back.
lineup. Right. Yeah.
World
Everything's
Junior
good.
starts the day after Christmas. I
And
can see it now.
who knows how many Sabres will be there? It's a big intrigue, right? Will Savoie and Benson be
Yeah.
hanging around with the big club? Will they not need? Wouldn't that be great for Matt Savoie? As much as it would, you're sitting here thinking, this guy kind of got a raw deal last year, not being on Team Canada, not getting gold. It'd be great if he could be on the team. I say it'd be even better if he could be in the NHL while that's happening and say, no thanks.
It would be, but like, I always say you're developing human beings.
Sure.
Not just hockey players. And I think knowing what it means for young hockey players to put on that jersey and play for Team Canada at the World Juniors, that would be something that would be just huge for him. It's not like you're going to let him make that decision, but I mean, if he had his druthers, I'm sure he would go. But I get what you're saying. I mean, but to your earlier comment, and we should get to some questions and comments before we talk a little bit about the D after this. But crap, I forgot what I was going to say. I totally got sidetracked. I forgot what I was going to say. It was something. Oh, yeah. You made a comment earlier. You said the Savoie thing, it isn't like the Zach Benson thing because, Benson's 18, Savoie's 19. It actually is in a way, if you think about it, because if he can help the team win, he'll play more than 9 games, Savoie will. And that's the whole reason why Benson's still here. He was helping the team win games, or they made the determination that he was an asset to keep around. They could easily made the decision to send him back to the WHL. He's still here. We don't know what's going to happen with Savoie, but I'm curious to find out. And on that last thought on that Cousins situation, if you put him at center with Krebs and Savoie on the wings, I definitely like it better against Minnesota than I do against Pittsburgh. So that would be the time to dabble if that's something that Granato's thinking about.
And they're at home. I was thinking the same thing about Pittsburgh on the road. You don't have the matchups you want, and so that could be tricky. And it's a good point on Savoie is if he can solve problems, if he can help you win games, he'll stick around. And I think the difference between him and Benson is that maybe in the Benson situation, you're sitting there and you're erring on the side of, okay, if he's not really breaking down the door, he's 18, he can go back to junior and it's all right. Savoie, you're sitting there and it's like, man, he's too good for Seth Appert had some good comments the other night about, the CHL rule.
Yeah.
Hey, he's an AHL coach who loves coaching Matt Savoie. So obviously he's got a bit of a bias in that rule, but his thought, and I agree with it to, for the most part, especially in Savoie's situation, is that adversity is going to make him better. Failure at a certain level is going to make him better than scoring 130 points in junior hockey. It's not to say it's always bad for these kids to go back to junior hockey, but for Savoie in particular, having already shown that he can compete at the AHL level, the situation Seth Appert could put him in, the way they could ask him to carry games for the Amherst could have just been great for his development. So that's where the situation's a little different. You're feeling in a draft plus 1 year in Benson's case, if he does have to go back to the WHL, not the end of the world. If Savoie has to go back, it's not the end of the world either. But clearly the preference is for him to play pro hockey because he's ready to at least be an AHL player, and he can't be an AHL player. So now you're sitting there and you're thinking, all right, boy, would it be good if this kid is ready to go, because, it's best for his development, number one. But all of a sudden, it would be best for the Buffalo Sabres. And that's where I think the Jiri Kulich conversation is becoming closer to a real one that the Sabres need to have, because my main thought on Jiri Kulich after the preseason, and stop me if I'm sidetracking too far here, but it seems like all these points just kind of bleed into one another.
No, let's roll, baby.
My main thought after the preseason with Kulich was this guy's an incredible scorer, tons of offensive ability, awesome on the power play. He's gotten bigger, he's gotten stronger. The 5-on-5 game still isn't quite there. The ability to compete night in, night out with the physicality of the NHL is a question mark. And the main thought in my head was, and it's why Benson stood out compared to Kulich, was like Benson was more the type of player that they needed in the lineup, on opening night because of the 200-foot game, the game away from the puck, the defensive ability, the IQ, the competitiveness. And my thought with Kulich was, well, they don't really need a power play guy right now. Now I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, this power play is a mess.
Yeah, that was then.
They could probably use
Kulich
on the power play alone. Even if he does, hardly anything else, but also he took the start of the season in the AHL exactly the right way, which is, what was the hope is that I think, he came out of the gates and he's firing from a goal scoring perspective. And I think there's still work to be done. I don't know that he's a plug and play. And they would have had the same thought about Kulich tonight against Carolina that they would have had about Savoie. It's like, that's not the spot. That's not
there were
the game, right?
3-year guys that had a hard time tonight against Carolina. Jiri Kulich would have got shredded in some of those situations tonight. And there's no doubt about it. It doesn't mean that he's not a great player. He's going to be. I don't want to pump our tires too much, but we've been pretty good about kind of forecasting call-ups, Byro, Rusek. I think
mostly
the Kulich call.
I'm not gonna take.
It's going to come. This is a team. We're a team. The Kulich call I could see comes as soon as Benson and Savoie go to Canada camp. So I think he's just got another. Maybe it's before then. I mean, for sure. Let's put it that way. For sure, Kulich should see some games in December when some openings happen. And by the way, Savoie and Benson going to World Junior Camp early in December is such a blessing for the Sabres. It allows them to just extend it out before they have to make a decision to send back. What happens if guys get hurt? They have the luxury of knowing that Benson and Savoie are going to come back January 6th or 7th or whatever it is. And maybe they have to keep them then if they want to. But by then, they're going to have a look at Jiri Kulich. And then they're going to know where all these various pieces are at. You have Isak Rosén, just let him continue, just stash him. To me, he's not really there right now. Right now, it's Kulich. He's a guy firmly in the on-deck circle for the call. And before you mentioned World Juniors, just because I can't help myself. Okay? Benson, Savoie, Oslin, Anton Wahlberg, Maxim Sturbach, Norwin Panoka, maybe Topias Lehtonen. Jiri Kulich is still eligible to play World Juniors. Not going to happen.
He won't play, right?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No. But that's kind of, the depth of young talent that they have is pretty wild. But and did I say Sturbach? I said Sturbach.
Yep.
He's going to be like the captain for Slovakia. But anyways, on Kulich, I think that's kind of, it's going to be tough to think it's going to take because that's a month away, that scenario that I just mentioned. Chances are you're probably going to see him get a look before that. If he keeps scoring at this clip, I mentioned on my podcast, I don't know if you listened, the Jason Pominville thing from 18 years ago. He had 19 goals in 18 games.
Yeah.
And I was like, early in the season, I was like, they're not going to do that. Kulich might, man. And he's 19 years old. It's wild. So, but to your point, if the power play does not get it going, for that alone, it's worth a look. Again, pick your spots when you play them. A Minnesota game would be really good for Jiri Kulich. And I'm not saying Minnesota's, a pushover. They're not. But they're also not playing the greatest right now. I don't know if you've been paying attention to Russo's tweets, man. They're having a rough go. You're more plugged into it than I am. But I don't know. That's just something. I think, like I said, will we see him before then? Maybe. Will we see him after Benson and Savoie go? I think it's almost a certainty.
Yeah, it's interesting the way I wouldn't have necessarily seen this happening when I showed up for the first day of training camp, to think about the amount of evaluation they've gotten of some of their young players early in this season. You had Rusek and Byro, a brief little window here that they're getting to look at them. Benson, came out of nowhere to earn a spot and get a look, and now you have a real good look at him and some strong development there. Ryan Johnson, who at the start of camp, in my mind, I was thinking, a good year in the AHL will be just fine for him. See how it goes. Their top six was set, and they also had depth, right? They had, especially, they end up trading Ilya Lyubushkin, but after they came out of free agency, I wasn't thinking there was room for Ryan Johnson at any point, and he gets to come up, and now he's playing fantastic. So you're sitting there, and they've gotten a look at a lot of guys, and if Kulich comes up before the new year, even for a few games here and there, you're striking that balance as an organization of winning, being competitive, pushing for a playoff spot while developing players, right? You always have to strike that balance in the NHL when you're relying on entry-level contracts and always trying to reload the system. And it's now, I think, a much better environment to develop in than it was, frankly, even 12 months ago. Because, and not that it was a bad environment to develop in 12 months ago, but now you're playing competitive hockey games. You're playing games that matter every single night. At least it should feel that way in that locker room. So for these guys that have to jump right into that and feel that, I think that's great. So, and they're doing it well. They're hanging in there. They're 6-6-1. They're, they've had some weird injury luck, some weird things pop up, and still they're getting looks at these guys, and they're finding a way to at least hang in the mix. So it's a nice little balance they have going. It's just, I'm waiting for one of these guys to jump in and just really run with it. And it may not happen. And it's not the end of the world if it doesn't, because in Rusek and Byro's case, decisions have to be made as far as contracts, and their age makes the urgency a bit more for them. But for Kulich, Benson, and Savoie, it's, if one of them can really burst onto the scene, that'd be great. If they don't, they can still, take the slower approach, and that's fine too.
Rusek's got the one-way next year. I think the call here was to just kind of temperature check, make sure he's getting a sniff of the speed and the physicality of the NHL game. Not thinking that he's going to, and they'll probably do it a couple times this year. I could see him getting double-digit games this year, honestly, when all is said and done, especially as Okposo needs rest and Gergensen needs rest and things like that. Gergensen's going to get dinged, right? And that's the role that Rusek is likely going to slot in if he does indeed become a full-time NHL player. He's a fourth-line guy, and that's okay. He's got the speed. He can play suffocating style. You don't need him to play offense, but he's got the club in the bag. He knows what to do with the puck when he gets it. With Kulich, I brought up a couple comments here. This was a two-parter. Upstate Ave. Oh, stay safe, my friend. He loves when I say that. It's a Prospect Avenue joke. Kulich needs to cook still, and then he mentions that the 5-on-5 is not there yet. I think it would be a phased thing with Kulich. Get him up, give him a taste, let him process it, send it back down. Hopefully he just keeps crushing it, and then you bring it back up, and he improves upon that. On the note about the 5-on-5, my point on him this year, where I think that he is just radically different, it's consistency this year. He's more often on the right side of his man when back checking. His stick is better. He's not a liability. And we need to not lose sight of the fact that he's here to score goals, and he's scoring a ton of goals. He has an array of shooting skills that would be an asset to this offense. And you're not going to be able to deny him the opportunity if he keeps scoring at the rate that he is. The AHL and the NHL, very different. Like I said, tonight, I think he would have a very hard time in this game. But not every opponent is the Carolina Hurricanes. And I think, again, you break them up, you bring him up, break off some chunks of responsibility, get him a taste, see how he does, temperature check, just like they did with Byro, just like they're doing with Rusek right now. That's kind of my take on it. It's going to be very hard. And that's part of the development also. You want to talk about adversity. He's going to have adversity in his first NHL game. get him a couple shifts, get rid of the butterflies. It's going to be. I don't know. I think it's going to happen before Christmas. I'm kind of just stuck on that right now. It's just a matter of not if but when with Kulich. But I just wanted to comment on that. And I get the commentary about the the two-way readiness. Sometimes, just make sure he's not a liability. And he understands the system. They play the same system in Rochester, and that's really all you want from him right now. But I don't want to overthink it and try to make him something that he's never going to be.
He's also
going to be
scoring at 5-on-5 this year.
7 of his 9 goals are at even strength.
That's to me a big deal. When I was looking at his numbers and I watched the stuff that you put together on the page here of the goals, and it's not just standing there teeing it up on the power play, right? Like he's finding, and a lot of what he did last year, I feel like how he gained his confidence and found his rhythm was, being so good on the power play. And he will be, I think, excellent on the power play in the NHL. But yes, I think that it's a good point by you too, that you don't need this guy to be Zemgus Girgensons, right?
Just need to be competent.
You just need you don't want him to be Victor Olofsson, and you don't want him to completely, but he's also so young, and he's younger than Victor Olofsson was when Victor Olofsson was making this transition. So, he has the offense already. And I think the fact that the Sabres are somewhat struggling to consistently score goals and very much struggling to score goals on the power play makes me think, yeah, he can help, and I was of the mindset of, at the beginning of the year that he could hang down there and, just until it was just painfully obvious that he was ready. And now I think that's happening quicker than I expected. And the team is showing a need more than I would have expected. The power play was such a strength for this team, and it's disappeared in that second unit in particular, though Peterka did have a power play goal. When was it? Was that last Wednesday? No, it was Saturday, actually, right? That he had the power play goal. And I remember looking around the ice thinking, Krebs was out there, no goals this year. Okposo was out there, no goals this year. Who else was on that unit? Olofsson was out. Was he out there? Did he play in that game? I don't know if he did. I'm blanking. The games are all running together. There was 3 guys on the ice who had not scored a goal this season on the second power play unit. And you think, man, they need some more guys.
Yeah, you texted me that. Yeah, you texted me that. You're like, yeah.
He was on the ice with 3 guys who hadn't scored a goal this year. And Peterka scored, and then Peterka scored, like, as I was thinking the thought, Peterka scores, and it's like, well, that unit worked, I guess. And Okposo's not a bad guy to have, in front of the net, and, he's got experience there, but all of a sudden it just feels like they need a little bit more. And that's, again, the domino effect of not having Jack Quinn. And in that game, the domino effect of not having Dylan Cousins. So as the injuries pile up, guys get pushed into roles. But that's where the Kulich thought popped into my head for sure.
Why don't we clear out a couple comments here before we talk about my favorite young defenseman in the Sabres system? And you know who that is. I think we may have answered this, but I want to throw Kevin up here because Kevin was in here before he was waiting, before we even hit record, before you even showed up, Matthew. Kevin was here before you were here. Kevin had commented 5 to 10. So what to do with Krebs? I think I gave you kind of my take on it right now, at least in the short term, where if Cousins comes back and you want to try Savoie and Krebs, that's kind of my take. Do you have any thoughts just in a general sense on what to do with Krebs, or did we already cover it? I wanted to reward Kevin.
Giving him a shot on the wing and giving him a shot with more offensive line mates makes sense. And I'll spin it back to you because my question about Krebs that I wanted to ask you, I've been thinking about it the last few days, is not just what to do with Krebs right now, but what is your outlook on what Krebs will be as an NHL player? Is it time to adjust maybe the idea of high upside offensive game? You know, what's your big picture look at Peyton Krebs? He's not a prospect anymore, but as you see him start to develop and you know, work his way into being a full-time NHLer, like, what is he long term?
It changed for me last year a little bit more. So, you know, in juniors, if you go back, and I liked him a lot as a junior player, very good playmaker. He didn't take any shortcuts, didn't cut any corners. He had a lot of leadership and was just a team guy. I always thought that maybe he'd be like like ultimately, to your commentary, at least the flavor of what you just how you teed it up. I always thought he'd be like a 1 goal to 2 assists, 2.5 assist guy. Okay, from a point total perspective. My perspective on him changed a little bit last year, not in a bad way necessarily, when he was down playing with Okposo and Girgensons and really started to embrace that role of just kind of clamping it down, not being relied upon as an offense, but there was still a hope that he could be a secondary offensive guy. He's still young. I still think he could be a third line guy. And that's kind of where we're talking about him right now on a good team, by the way. He's just not there yet. And it's kind of showing right now. I don't think it's as a centerman right now either. I think that he's a guy that can go up and down the wing, but ultimately as these waves of prospects start coming up and Kulich and Savoie, Benson is a few more years in his career, Krebs is a guy that likely gets lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, it feels that way, right? And as
And I
more of
hate
these
saying
guys,
that.
somebody has to get lost in the shuffle, right? And that's where it was encouraging to see Krebs embrace that two-way game last year and that aspiring UFC middleweight, as you like to put it, when he drops the gloves and when he's
Super odd, man, that he's out there scrapping like that.
and he's
You know what
terrific
though?
in the room,
Like,
to your point. Go ahead.
I don't want to make a comparison stylistically to like Curtis Lazar, but you know, how, like Curtis Lazar kind of bounces around and like finds a role on decent teams. Like he's not a guy that goes out to like Arizona or who's ever at the bottom of the roster and he has to, or the bottom of the league, and he has to go to those types of teams to see if he can get his game back and reclaim himself. That's ultimately what Krebs might end up doing, is being that guy that goes to like those teams that are like in the hunt, or, you know, Lazar, by the way, played in like Boston, right? And
Yeah.
where's he now? Jersey somewhere, right? I mean, these are
Yep.
good teams. Curtis Lazar was also a first round draft pick, I believe. I mean,
Well,
a lot of partying that's gone on in the past couple of years, but I'm pretty sure that's where Curtis Lazar was. I know coming out of juniors in the Edmonton Oil Kings, he was very sought after prospect. He was a first rounder.
that's
That
what
might be like the career trajectory.
yeah, that's the funny thing about first rounders in hockey especially, is that there's a good chunk of the league was a first rounder, right? Like Zemgus Girgensons was a first rounder, and he carved out his career the way he carved out his career. And
Pretty
you
much like
know
every guy the Sabres have is a first rounder.
right, I mean,
Joe,
there's
Skirgensons, Thompson, Johnson, Dahlin, Krebs, Power, yeah, Poso. Yeah, all these guys.
Okposo was a
Peterka should have
first
been.
rounder. Yeah.
Yep. Skinner, Jokiharju was a late first rounder. Eric Johnson, all these guys. Mittelstadt, Tuch, like literally every single guy except like Lucas Rusek. It's
Right.
crazy. But
So
anyway, sorry, I stepped on you. Yeah.
like you could probably go up and down rosters and see a lot of that, right? That's the nature of, is that not all of these guys, just because you're picked in the first round, doesn't mean you're a top six or you're a guy scoring a bunch of points, and guys slot into different roles. Krebs felt like a guy that was drafted in the first round because of his offensive potential, though. And that's where him shifting a little bit is, yeah, you got to adjust expectations, and they have to do it because they have other guys coming through and there's going to be decisions that need to be made. But he is a really nice leader to have in that room, a good
I love him,
glue
man.
guy.
I hate saying that about like, and trying, I don't like forecasting that for Krebs. It's uncomfortable for me. It's more of a function. It's not really necessarily about him as a player. It's about the opportunity that he has here right now, that he's got guys ahead of him. And there's going to be the younger guys coming up in waves that might just kind of force him elsewhere. That's kind of where I'm coming from on that, if I didn't properly articulate it before.
No, absolutely. I think that's part of the problem is when I was looking at lines in the offseason, when Quinn went down, my thought was how, and I think I even asked Don Granato this when he and I sat down after development camp. It's like, how do you, or it was on my list of questions and maybe we didn't get to it, but the main thing on my mind was how do you get Peyton Krebs with more offensive line mates? Like, how do you see if some of that can come out, if he can get around players that can take advantage of what he does well? And we're seeing, it feels like we're seeing like what Casey Mittelstadt had early last year, where Casey Mittelstadt was not with Okposo and Gergensen, so he was not playing the shutdown grinder game, but he was also not in the top 6. So he was with, Olofsson, and it just wasn't working. And you're sitting there looking at his 5-on-5 numbers thinking, man, what's wrong with Casey Mittelstadt? But then you start putting him around more talented players. I don't think Krebs is Casey Mittelstadt, but it's a similar frustration in the evaluation for me when I say I can't even figure out what Casey Mittelstadt is because of who he's playing with, and it's not fitting. And then he gets with certain line mates and it really clicks. So I don't think that's necessarily in the cards. I don't think a Mittelstadt evolution is in the cards necessarily for Peyton Krebs, but it's a non-zero possibility because we're talking about, we can't sit here 1 minute and talk about how Savoie and Kulich and these guys need adversity and need failure, and then look at Peyton Krebs and say, as he's going through that it totally wipes out his upside. But it does. I do think there's a big enough body of work, to your point, that you just forecast things a little bit differently because of things are happening fast in the Sabres organization right now. Savoie's going to get games. Benson got games. Kulich's going to get games. Like, this is life.
We talked about Kevin Adams. Like, he's going to have some hard decisions to make, and like taking guys out of that room eventually at some point. And I don't think it's imminent with Krebs. That's why, but hey, you said give him some more offensive line mates. I know Savoie hasn't done anything in the NHL, but Cousins, Savoie, Krebs, throw it together. Let's see what happens. And we'll go from there. And then maybe in a week I could say, oh man, Peyton Krebs, he's a dog.
Right.
You never know, right? Let's kick through a few more of these. I'm going to skip the one about the defenseman because we'll tee it up that way. Feel free to throw something up here that you see. Chat's definitely hopping tonight. Thanks, everyone. We got a lot to go through here. Ev also says, just real quick while we're talking about prospects, Rosén could be ahead of Kulich for a call-up. No. Not yet for me, but close. And I'll just kind of leave it at that. Not yet for me, but close. I love Isak Rosén. I think that he had some bad pub in Saberland, I think, early on. He had that kind of, it was just a tougher go that first post-draft season, but I think it's pretty clear that he's adjusted to North American hockey, and he could be a very versatile, high skill, very fast player that fits very well into the system that they have installed here presently. Michael Pakla, I know I said we weren't going to talk about certain defensemen, but Michael Pakla, by the way, is from the state of Ohio. State of Ohio legalized recreational marijuana tonight. Congratulations, Michael Pakla. I don't know if you're into that or not, but I saw that come up on USA Today, and I know Michael Pakla's from Ohio.
The Seeds and Stems hour here.
Seeds and Stems. Yeah, here we go. It's here we go again. Baker Fairburn show after dark, but get after it if that's what you're into, Michael Pakla. Clifton seems to be getting better. Fact or fiction? Fact. Matthew, fact or fiction?
Fact, 100%. We were not worried about him early in the year, and these last 2 games, I thought he's been really solid. I think he's got a chance to move. You know what? He would probably move up the lineup if Henry Jokiharju wasn't also playing pretty well. And I think what we mentioned about Connor Clifton is you're starting to see some of it. He needed a little bit of time to get comfortable playing this style, first of all, but also the team needs time to start to settle into some sort of structure around him, because he's used to playing within a team where there's structure. And I don't think he's necessarily used to being quite as aggressive offensively. Brian Cummings mentions the rush he had early in the game, had a grade A scoring chance. That's not something that he was tasked with doing a bunch of in Boston. So he deserves
But
a
you
little
did
bit of
see it
time.
from time to time. He sneaks into those
You
seams,
did?
but he
Oh,
didn't always have to do it. He used to
it's
do it in
part of his
college.
game. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
big
Yep.
part of his game at Quinnipiac. When I was talking to Rand Pecknold over the summer and talking to some of his old coaches, they did mention that he has the instincts to do it. But when you're in a third pair role in Boston and you're fighting for your NHL life most of the time and fighting for ice time, not unlike, what you're talking about with Krebs, like you're finding ways to survive, right? You're finding ways to stay on the ice, and that aggressiveness offensively maybe isn't your trademark, but it can be part of his game if they
So
want it to be.
So on Krebs, just to kind of stack up comments here real quick, Curtis Lazar, 17th overall. Thank you, Spike. And right after this, Teddy, Krebs was ranked top 10 most of the year before his injury, dropped to 17th overall. Lazar, 17th overall. Krebs, 17th overall. That was not set up, by the way. But maybe there is a similar trajectory there. Like I said, just career-wise, I don't know. We'll see. And I don't, again, I like Curtis Lazar plenty, but there's only so many jobs, right? Yeah, the Krebs injury too, by the way, he was legitimate top 10 in his draft class. He had an Achilles injury. I think got cut from a skate training like after his season, between the end of his WHL season and the draft. That was a bummer, but that was also a good story that he came back from that and, kind of jumped right into big boy hockey pretty quickly after missing significant time recovering from that injury. Let's see. Anything else before I just jump right in? Let's just talk here. Let me throw it up here to kind of kick us off. Here's one more here, by the way. We'll go back to Kevin real quick. JJ Cousins Savoie Friday put Krebs with mitts. I don't want to disrupt. I'm with Matthew. The more I think about it, that Mittelstadt Greenway Peterka thing just seems to be kind of doing pretty well right now. I give him another game, and then Donnie, I'm sure will get the blender back out and start mixing drinks with these lines. Okay. So where is the comment that I saw earlier? I apologize. I know this is really great for people that are going to listen to this on audio
I
the
think I
next
know the
day.
one you're talking about. I think it's this one.
Yeah, how good, bro. Yeah, thank you, Anthony Rinaldi, and thank you, Matthew Fairburn, for fishing that out. Matthew, it's like Hollywood Squares. Matthew, how good was Ryan Johnson tonight?
He was damn good, Kris. He was
He was, man.
1906, even strength ice time, led the Sabres, which is that, going back to what we talked about earlier, said it all to me, is that we were texting at the end of the game as they're in that tight spot with a defensive zone draw, and they were in the defensive zone because of an icing. But, we were talking that Ryan Johnson was on the ice in the final minute of the game against the Carolina Hurricanes with the game tied. I mean,
On the road.
on the road in a tough building, the whole thing.
That
I mean,
matters. Yep.
not only that, but go back to Saturday and he gets called up, on Saturday. He has to get a car service. He mentioned he got to the game so late he didn't have time to be nervous. Makes that beautiful pass to Jeff Skinner. Again, as you mentioned, center of the hockey universe, right? This is Toronto. This is Hockey Night
in
in
Canada,
Canada.
baby.
The
Yep.
whole, yeah. I mean, 2 straight games for him to do this, super encouraging. He has, in my eyes, passed Jacob Bryson on the organizational depth chart if he hadn't already coming into the season. Obviously, he hadn't, in the sense that, he went back down and Bryson stayed up, but, there's contracts and stuff. This kid, you've been beating the drum all summer, and I didn't know what to expect, frankly. I didn't know, didn't follow his college career super closely. Got to development camp and thought, "Yep, this guy can skate. This guy's got skill, but, what's the rest of it look like?" Because during the Frozen Four, even in the run up, that was probably the most that I saw him, and it's just now seeing him, how he fits into this system and this style of play. it's a nice
modern two-way D. That's kind of
it,
how you would describe him. He's a modern two-way defenseman, smart. I don't, the thing I wrote down tonight on Johnson, and again, I've been, whatever, I'm trying to keep it clean, but I've been singing his praises for a little bit now, is regardless of where he ends up in this lineup, the experience that he's going to gain playing these minutes with Rasmus Dahlin and those matchups that they get is going to be valuable for a long time, like as he's still a young player and he's getting his, his minutes in, his hours. I always talk about the 10,000 hours. I just love the outliers. It's always whatever. It's been sitting on my nightstand for 3 years. Dusty as hell, that book, but it's over there. But super valuable, like for his development and for them to throw him in. And I thought he looked really good tonight. So promising, so encouraging. You get Samuelson back. I'm already like, this is what I do. You got to reel me in, Matthew, because this is what I do. I get ahead of myself, but you can kind of see it. Sabres, this defense becomes a position of strength pretty quickly as he gets more experience. And if they can somehow find a way to keep Matthias Samuelson healthy, as Owen Power continues to grow, and that partnership with Yoki Haru seems to be working.
Yeah, Yoki Haru's emergence
and Clifton's adjusting, to the new system. I like where this is going with Johnson in the mix. And I didn't even mention Erik Johnson, by the way, who's been an absolute horse.
He has. He's been great, especially on the penalty kill. I think he deserves a ton of credit for why the penalty kill has turned around. He and Clifton have both been, good in that area. Ryan Johnson helps so much long term too, right? If he can be, one of those, he looks like a guy that could just move up and down the pairs and play with just about anybody because, like you said, he's smart. He understands how to play. He doesn't need to play necessarily with a certain type. He can read the play and read the game really well. And so you can kind of, mix and match and plug and play. He gives you flexibility, and he doesn't need to be a power play guy necessarily, that, not with Power and Dahlin here, but the rest of his game is so much more ready than I thought it would be at this stage when, who would have thought? I mean, Chris Baker would have thought, but I'm sitting there in the spring when he's hemming and hawing about whether he's going to, sign or test free agency. What a get. I mean, to get him under contract, that was pretty big. Like to get him in the organization, a guy that you want guys on different timelines, right? And they drafted a few defensemen this spring or this summer. So you have something to look forward to there. Obviously, they have Owen Power, who's super young, but Johnson fits into a different timeline than any other defensive prospect that they have in the system. And that's a pretty big deal when you're talking about Erik Johnson on a 1-year deal and, some contract question marks, elsewhere with like a Henry Jokiharju. So all of a sudden you've got an option. And I think having him up here to get some
gives them
games,
leverage.
yeah,
It gives them leverage to negotiate with these guys too. If they know that you have a guy that's just going to plug right in. And, to Teddy's question here, yeah, it absolutely speaks to the depth that they have. Novikov, you got to remember, he's a rookie in Rochester, but he looks good. And he has some pro experience in the KHL. So his transition has been going really well. It kind of falls off after that, in my opinion, like Komarov's going to take a while. And get out of here. Damn it, I got all these animals in this damn house. Go the other way. Mats Lindgren still waiting to get his contract. He's going to be, a longer term guy. It's going to need some time. It kind of falls off a little bit, but the only other guy that I can think of really like Sturbach's like legit NHL guy to me by the time he's done Michigan State. And I don't think he's going to need a lot of time. You can kind of forecast where he's going to be physically and his readiness to play professional hockey. I think he's going to be a guy that moves through the system pretty quickly once he leaves Michigan State. But no, the Ryan Johnson thing, and the thing I really like about Johnson too, he's going to be a guy that can play both sides. So you're going to have a lot of flexibility with him. He's going to be a guy that's adaptable to all
He's
sorts
already
of
done it,
partners.
right? I think
Yes.
like he's already done
Yeah.
it here in
He's
the
done
couple
it
games.
here. And I thought that, they would take him out of his comfort zone and make sure he was playing primarily right side, just to kind of get him going over there in Rochester. But they've kind of moved him around a little bit. Mostly played left mostly left. But he can play it. He even commented on it, like he's so like, I mean, he has to think about the position that he plays, and he's a professional, right? He takes it seriously. He was just talking about like the reach and the different stick angles, playing the right side, coming over from playing the left side. He's thinking about it, and he's already thinking about how to get better doing it. He mentioned that very early on in rookie camp when asked about it. Duffer and I spent a lot of time talking about it, but when we were going back when he was still mulling his decision, I'm so happy to see Ryan Johnson get a look this early, because we were saying he should see the opportunity here in Buffalo when thinking about what's best for his career. Well, he saw the opportunity and he's getting it early. Now, I thought coming out of the Prospects Challenge, I go back and I talked about Chris Butler. I went back to my podcast. It was like the third or fourth one I did. And I was like, what did I say about Johnson? I knew it was something. I compared him to Butler. Chris Butler came out of Denver, 3 and out, was good enough to make the Sabres, but they had to go and stash him in Rochester until things cleared up. By the time Christmas came around, Butler was up in the NHL full-time, never looked back. That's kind of how I was thinking. Maybe Ryan Johnson, similar, was good enough to make the team. Due to numbers, had to go down. But he's already up. I never thought he'd be up this early. I thought maybe by the time the calendar flipped to 2024, you'd kind of see him here a little more often. It's November, man, early November.
And he looks
and he's
good.
Playing with Rasmus Dahlin.
Right. He's playing with Dahlin. That's what's
creepers, man.
Especially, I thought they had, they got Kel Clegg, they got Riley Stillman. Like, they had these options. And so I do give them a lot of credit for not totally losing sight of who they are and what got them here as an organization, playing young players, trusting some of these young players in high leverage situations. Kevin Adams mentioned it in regards to Devin Levi, which, is a decision that I've quibbled over a bit on the show, of just maybe too much was handed to him too soon. But when I framed that question to Kevin about, by the time you know whether he's ready, your window to add a goalie this offseason's kind of gone. And he mentioned, we asked the players to play fearless, and so we want to operate that way. And that's what I feel like this was Donnie Granato being completely fearless. Why wouldn't you have confidence if you're Ryan Johnson when your coach not only calls you up? It sounds like Ryan Johnson was a little surprised on Saturday that it was him getting the call up.
He didn't even have a tie on when he walked into the arena, man.
And, so he's a little surprised. He gets thrown in against the Leafs. But then why wouldn't you be confident when you skate out there at practice Monday? You're fresh off an assist, your first NHL point, and your coach tells you, yeah, you're gonna skate with Dahlin today. We're gonna see how that looks on Tuesday against Carolina. Yeah, you get a little pep in your step. I feel like if you're, and so putting these players in those situations, very bit, they're threading the needle here between development and competing. That is really hard to do, but that is necessary given that they're still, I think, the youngest team in hockey. I haven't referenced it as often because I think people got tired of hearing how young they are, but still the youngest team in hockey, still a group with more young players on the way. And Ryan Johnson is almost like a bonus, it feels like. I was unsure whether he was going to sign. Then he hops in, and all of a sudden you've got, it makes your defense stronger now, but stronger for the future. That was the biggest weakness. And this is why the draft is so weird. And, this summer it was like, they got to get a defenseman with this pick. It's like, no, just pick whoever's best at 13.
Who's here today, could be gone tomorrow.
Yeah, worry about filling out the pipeline later.
No.
And then all of a sudden, here's Ryan Johnson, and it's like that first rounder from 4 years ago, and he looks like a first rounder, and that's a big deal.
No, he does. And a lot of fans wanted a forward with that pick when the Johnson pick was made. And I'm just excited. I hope he sticks. You know why? Really? One less guy I got to cover.
That's right. You got a lot on
He's
your
up in
plate.
Buffalo. I got a lot on my plate. Back to Victor Olofsson real quick. John Potempa. JD. He says, is Olofsson ever on embedded videos? Do any of his teammates even like him or bond with him? You don't really have to go there, but I wanted to throw it up on Olofsson. You can opine on that if you want to. I don't, but it was more about, I wanted to throw it up because I wanted to get back to Olofsson real quick. You can, and again, if you want to address that, you can. That's up to you. But I do think that, the guys like him.
He's a
But
nice guy.
yeah, I think they like him. I didn't want you to like,
Yeah.
you know where I'm going with that. You don't need to dirty laundry. But on Olofsson, so we saw Byro come up, get the call at him, Lucas Rusek. And have you seen a change in Olofsson's demeanor, behavior? Have you seen him have conversations with Kevin Adams? You're down at the rink. I'm not. I spend too much time here.
I think there is, well, the first part of it, I don't know if he's on. I watch most of the embedded videos. I can't remember if I've seen him on any of them. I do get the sense that teammates like him. I don't know for sure. I can't sit here and say what they say about him when we're not around, but he is a very nice guy. And, very keeps to himself. It seems he's not the most boisterous guy in the room, but he works. I mean, he's on the ice, late at practice. It's not a guy that's, cutting corners. It's a guy whose game, the competitiveness and the, that when it comes to anything other than scoring, it seems like there's something lacking in his game. I don't think it's anything to do with him as a person, but I have felt going back to last year, you can sense the frustration. And he doesn't strike me as the type of personality to become disgruntled, to the point where it's a problem. But it's one of those things where I think everybody in the room knows what's going on. Victor understands that he doesn't really fit. He knows. Everybody, I think, if we know, then these guys know, right? Like they can see the ice time. He's getting the ice time. He knows how it feels. He's the one getting scratched and going up into the press box. Like he knows. And, I think, they tried over the summer, they talked to him and said they would try to find some sort of solution, but the solution is hard to find when so many teams are up against the cap. You're looking at $4.75 million. That number gets smaller with each passing day because teams inherit the money prorated. So, I guess in that sense, that's helping. Every dollar the Sabres pay him is a dollar somebody else doesn't have to pay him. But there's the player piece of this too, is that if he's getting scratched from a Sabres lineup where we're sitting here saying, man, they need to figure something out with that third line. And they
Middle
keep
of the road
scratching this
team
guy.
in the conference. Yeah.
Right. Like if they can't find a use for him when what he in theory could be is one of their biggest needs right now, that's shrinking the list of suitors for him, for his services. The salary cap shrinks his list of suitors. So then do they get to a point at some point where they would consider waiving him? I don't know. I mean,
No.
I think that would probably be a bridge too far because I just don't think they have the bodies unless they're going out and making a trade or signing somebody. But even then, they just don't really have the bodies at forward to be getting rid of him unless some of these other young guys just really take the ball and run with it. So it's, as we've discussed, it's kind of just, this is what it is right now. And he'll slot in maybe in certain matchups where it works, but the spark
As I say,
isn't.
they won't waive him. I think of I never thought that, Eli Tolvanen would have been waived and then he got picked up and, I guess my point is there's always snipers or these guys that are really good at one thing. They always find a way to, like Daniel Sprong. keep finding jobs. That could be Olofsson. I don't see it. I don't see him getting waived though. I don't. It's tough though right now because I hear you loud and clear. I mean, I think that, and I think he tries. He's just not strong enough to win the battles. He's in the spaces he needs to be in.
Yeah,
And
there's
it's
some effort there that was missing at times last year, maybe, right? There's a
willingness, the will.
Yeah, the willingness is a better word because I don't want to say the effort wasn't there before, but there is clearly been an effort by him to address the areas that they wanted addressed. But to your point, it's not in his nature from a strength perspective, and it doesn't feel like it's truly in his nature just from a play style competitiveness type of what will be fascinating with Victor Olofsson, and it won't be particularly relevant to the Sabres, regardless of what happens this year, is next summer. Say the cap goes up a few $1,000,000, Victor Olofsson's an unrestricted free agent. Then what happens? Because then you'll get your answer as to, why didn't they move him in the summer, or why couldn't they get something for him? Whatever dollar figure he gets, or if he gets another deal, that will tell you, how the rest of the league feels about him to an extent. And so then you can start to say, okay, maybe the mistake with Victor Olofsson was really just the contract to begin with being too big and, not being able to find a trade partner. That might not be Kevin Adams' fault at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think we'll find out. I think either way, I think, if he wants to be in the NHL next year, he'll make more money, even, at a pay cut than he would make, say, if he went back to Sweden or something like that. He'd be a superstar in Sweden, and I'm sure he'll end his career there. You can kind of see the writing on the wall, perhaps. But either way, again, boy, I'm writing guys off tonight. I don't know what's in me. It must have been that coffee. I did change up my coffee, new flavor. But Matthew, we've gone about an hour and a half. And maybe we can shelve some of these things. We had a couple other things. We covered most of the ground, I think, that we wanted to talk about tonight. There were some fun exercises. Let me throw it up.
I forgot. We had.
Let me throw it up. And I didn't really prepare for this, so we might just have to kind of wing it. But I do want to throw it up. Let me see if I can do this real quick. The Miami Heat. I want to talk about the Miami Heat. Is that what you want to talk about?
That's what I had forgotten about. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just throw it up because it won't be as relevant next. It won't be as relevant next time around, I don't think. But the Miami Heat came out with their culture court. And I wanted to throw it up because if I can, let me see if I can do this because I'm like horrible at this. We need a producer.
We do.
Let me see if I can
field applications.
Okay. Let's see if this works. There it is. This is the Miami Heat's culture court. So this is what they put in the paint. And this is their, I guess, what their little motto. I forget how they
even have it. They have it on their jerseys too.
Do they? Here,
culture is on there.
Let me do this real quick. It says Miami went out. Yeah, the Heat culture court. So let me bring this back up. So this is the first picture. Heat culture. Hardest working, best condition, most professional, unselfish, toughest, meanest, nastiest team in the NBA. And my question to you, and I guess we'd have to figure this out. What would the Sabres culture rank say?
First of all, I think there's too many adjectives there. They need to hone in on a message and give me 3 or 4 things that you are. Too many of these are redundant. If you're the hardest working, I'm going to assume you're the best conditioned. Best conditioned, most professional, unselfish, toughest, meanest, nastiest. Those are all kind of the same thing.
Toughest and nastiest, yeah. Nastiest also kind of conflicts sometimes, I think, with most professional. Well, maybe not.
Yeah, I don't know. They're really just throwing a lot of things in the in the word salad here. What would the Sabres version say? Well, competitive would have to be there, right?
Competitive, hard on pucks,
Like,
bodies to the net, bodies
like
at
the
the
problem
net.
is you wouldn't want it to be like some of the things Don Granato likes to say, like simple and direct. You don't want to be the most simple
Yes.
team in the NHL.
Yeah.
You don't want
I
to be
got one.
the Buffalo Simpletons.
Let's dig into the Sean McDermott playlist for a second here. Complementary hockey.
There you go. 5-man unit.
5-man unit. There you go.
Teamwork would be up there.
I totally didn't prepare for this. I just thought this was funny and it would have been a good bit, but I did not prepare for it at all.
I forgot. I'm forgetting some of the buzzwords, and some of them don't fit so well with this. That is just too long. I'm looking
I
at
thought
it,
this
and
was kind of cheesy. I thought
it.
this was just like incredibly cheesy, but also I think right par for the course for the NBA these days.
Yeah, it is definitely. This is something, and the fact that it's on the jersey too. I mean, this is this in the key?
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, it says unselfish. I don't want this to be a commentary on the NBA, but I find the NBA to be filled with the most selfish people. Like James Harden lately has been the poster child for the NBA. Unfortunately, he just seems so selfish.
Well, the Heat are pushing back against that. They're trying to win with teamwork,
They're
being
unselfish.
unselfish.
Yeah, I
And
should say it. Listen, I like watching basketball. You know, I don't want to be this guy that's like my sport. I just thought this was really, really out there for me. I don't know. Maybe I'm old school.
we need to work on a Sabres version, and
We do.
we'll have it. We'll have the listeners send us some ideas for their favorite words for the Sabres culture court, and we will or culture rink, and we'll put it up there. Maybe next
Best
time.
conditioned,
Next time I
toughest, meanest.
see Kevin Adams,
Yes,
I'll
Sabres.
ask him if he is considered fearless. That's
Oh,
what
fearless. Yes,
fearless. The
fearless.
most fearless team in the
I
NHL.
like it.
That would probably be, the fastest, hardest working.
Fastest, fearless.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can't even talk anymore.
that would be the one. That would be the one. We were talking about culture. This will be my final point here. Now we're deep into the podcast. We've got, only the diehards left, so I feel safe to share a culture adjacent take that's been marinating as I've visited some visiting rinks here early in the season. I think the Sabres need to pick one goal song. I think the individual goal songs, I think they've outgrown it. And I think it's too late now. I guess you start the season, you got your individual goal songs, everybody's having fun with it, but I think KeyBank Center, as anybody here listening that has been to a game, is not the most fun place to watch a hockey game these days. The attendance is still down near the bottom of the league. The Sabres are struggling to really win fans back, hook, line, and sinker, and get back that season ticket base back up. But I think part of what makes KeyBank Center not the best place to watch a hockey game is the building feels like it lacks identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of what gives a building identity is your traditions and your, things that people can count on when they go to a game, or things that your opponent hates. How much do you think AFC East teams hate the damn shout song, right? How much do Bruins opponents hate Zombie Nation? Having these things that are anchors to your identity as a stadium, as an arena. I think the individual goal songs were terrific for the stage that they were in before, where it's like, hey, fans are coming back into the building. You should meet these new guys that we have, right? And see their personalities and all that. But when Don Granato brought up last week that they were playing not necessarily as a 5-man unit, like they need to get it in their head that every goal is a Sabres goal, right? And every goal is kind of an all for one type of situation. So I don't know. That's just my thought. Maybe it's an old man yells at clouds take. I know Jeff Skinner goes viral every time he scores with the High School Musical, and it's a good time. I certainly love, I know my press box neighbor Joe Yurden loves when Henry Jokiharju scores and the Iron Maiden comes over the speakers. I just think the place would be a little bit more. It would have a bit more of a personality if there was one song, and you got to get that song right, but it's part of what makes some of these other arenas come to life in their own ways. Everybody knows when they score, something's happening. And I think online it plays great when Jeff Skinner scores and you're playing High School Musical and the clips go viral and it's all fun and it's good. But
counterintuitive though to that.
Right. To the average Joe sitting in the arena who doesn't know what the hell High School Musical is or that Jeff Skinner even picked that song, I think the not online fan is probably thinking, what in the world is going on? And rather would like Chelsea Dagger in Chicago or Zombie Nation in Boston or, pick your goal
Chelsea
song.
Dagger.
Well, yeah, but that's because it heard it thousands of times as they just kept racking up cups. People hate Zombie Nation, but if you're a Bruins fan, that's the type of thing that, triggers positive memories. So there's only 2 teams in the NHL that do individual goal songs, the Sabres and the Capitals.
I was going to say the Caps. It sounds like something that
the Panthers did it last year and they switched. They have a team goal song now. So
I think my only thoughts on the goal song before we wrap it up, because I do have to get rid of this. If you know what I mean. I've had to go to the bathroom for about 35 minutes. Number one, I thought that we just saw Strauss-Mann for Laval score a goal against the Amerks earlier this season. So if you're going to give the players individual goal songs, you better at least cue one up for UPL, Devin Levi, and Eric Comrie, because that can happen. So that was an oversight. Okay. And as goaltender union members, right? I didn't play goalie, you did, but I come from a family of lunatics that play the position. Also, I think the goal song, I always wanted Bob Marley, Buffalo Soldier, the chorus to be the goal song. Just that snippet, everyone could kind of get into it. That would be an environment.
Yeah, it's not easy, but you want to sing along because that's the
sing along, man.
Right. Yeah. That's a great example. Henry Jokiharju scores. Even the most online Sabres fan saw the list of goal songs and is maybe like, okay, cool, I got the gist of it. Henry Jokiharju scores, and now they're playing Iron Maiden, and that's great for my neighbor in the press box, and for some people who like Iron Maiden, but for some people it's disorienting probably when
there's a bunch of guys that I saw that list. I was like, I hope he doesn't score.
Right. I was hoping Ilya Labushkin would score last year because Gummy Bear was his. It was like a kid's song that his kids picked up.
Yeah.
But, somebody, and I wish I could remember because I would like to give proper credit. When he scored an overtime winner on the road, somebody put out a video with Gummy Bear overlaid on top of as if it had been scored at home, and it was pretty satisfying. But I think something that everybody can, obviously, let me clear my throat was a little bit of didn't quite land for this
jock
team.
jam.
But, it's not easy. You got to pick the right song. I'm not pretending this is a layup. I'm not even being really critical of the fact that they did the individual goal songs. I just think as they move into this next era, having one song really underscores the idea of it's no longer about how many goals Dylan Cousins has or how many times home fans get to hear Fishing in the Dark because Tage Thompson scored. They're all Sabres goals. That's my old man take of the day here, an hour and a half into the
I love it. I love it when you, as the young guy on this podcast, brings the old man heat, man. I feel a lot better when you do that.
I've got it.
On that note, Matthew, I like where you went with that. I don't disagree with the take conceptually. I get where you're going, and I subscribe. I do. On the note, so Brian Cummings, I just want to call this out right now. Brian is banned actually from the podcast moving forward. He left us, watched a whole other podcast live, came back, and we're still here. Yes, we're still here. Hour and a half. Of course, you're not banned, but don't ever leave us again. But on that note, I think we are done for this. While it is still November 7th, 2023, by the way, it's 11:53 p.m. We're going to cut this short. Matthew, good job tonight. You can find Matthew's work at The Athletic. I think you're out of the Bills beat. You were filling in for our pal Joe Biscaglia for a little bit. You are now full-time Sabres beat. You can find Matthew's, all the stuff that he's got cooked up at The Athletic site, well worth the money. And you can find me mostly on Twitter, on YouTube, on this channel. I might do some writing soon. I was telling Matthew earlier that I miss it. It's just a matter of me finding time. I get the itch, but I don't know. It's a big commitment, man. I don't want to start something that I can't finish. So the podcast, I do enjoy doing it, both on my own and with you here every week. Everyone, thanks for hopping in tonight again. Sabres, hopefully a better result when they return to the ice on, telling people, Friday
at home.
The Wild at home. Maybe we'll see Matthew Savoie, maybe not. I guess we'll find out then. More to come. We love cliffhangers. For Matthew Fairburn, for the production crew out in the truck in front of my house, I'm Kris Baker. We'll see you next week.